These foothills of Mount Snowdon are one place where King Arthur and I crossed paths. I hiked here in the rain this summer, blistering my heels. Arthur was carried here 1,500 years ago, mortally wounded after his final battle. Or so the story goes. That these mists hide Avalon, the magic island of Morgan Le Fay and her 9 sisters. That this lake conceals Arthur's sword Excalibur, bestowed to Arthur by the Lady of the Lake and thrown back to her before he returned to Avalon. Thousands hike by without seeing Avalon, but I see a liminal space, the veil between the story and the world. A space where legends of Morgan the Healer and Arthur the King have survived for more than 1,000 years, becoming as much a part of the landscape as the mountain itself. A space where my story and my blisters are forever mixed with the legends of Morgan and Arthur, England and Wales, in the cauldron of stone and story. We live in a world of betwixt and between, of shaded overlap between water and land, between Bronze Age and digital. A world where a marker left 1,000 years ago on the moors of Cornwall still tells stories today. But what tales do we see in these giant stones when the series has played for centuries, and the first episode has long been forgotten? Even the canvas it sits upon, now much less temperate and fertile than 3,000 years ago, may change our vision. We're here at the Nine Maidens, and what we're finding is that the land is as important as the stones. The land is intimidating, but it's protective. As an English professor with a deep interest in medieval literature, I see a story that has been erased by time, but has been overwritten by successive voices, much like modern fan fiction for a now forgotten author.
In truth, we just don't know what a lot of these things are.
Computer teacher Carl Smith grew up not far from the Nine Maidens, and this nearby round stone called Min en Tol. It's said to be guarded by a pixie who can promote fertility.
The legend says that if you pass through the centre stone 3 times, you get pregnant. I've tried it multiple times. I still haven't gotten pregnant yet.
Smith jokes, but he sees a cultural story in these stones. A tale filled with tension because of what we do not know, yet also a story filled with potential because of what we may discover.
As successive cultures have conquered the Isles, they've tried to explain what they've found using their own sort of mythology.
And every stone is an evolving myth.
Those things are all drawn from myths and legends that, like the Merry Maidens, which is very close to here, was allegedly a group of women who were dancing on the Sabbath, and they were turned into rock stones by God's wrath.
But on the day I arrived, God's wrath with Merry Maidens had been dissolved, transitioned, and reincorporated as a playground for families. Simon Costin, director of the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic in Cornwall, says these sites become what we imagine them to be.
It's what we project onto these things. Because we know nothing about what was practiced in them, and why they were constructed quite often, we're only guessing and second-guessing and projecting onto them.
There's always been a very intimate connection, I think, between stories and the land.
Carolyn Larrington is an Oxford professor and scholar of Old Norse and medieval Arthurian literature and its representations in popular culture.
What we've had, I think, ever since people started telling stories, is a sense of place, the kind of place where particular things might happen, that you might find marsh spirits around a bog, or you might find where you have huge boulders and mighty landforms. You can see that giants have been at play there and have shaped the land.
And if you look closely at these stones at Boscanoon, you will see them still speaking, the stories still being written, in shells, in ribbons, and in colorful petals. But there are no roses around here. But we can find rose petals dropped all around the ring. That tells us that this space is used for some kind of ceremony. A ceremony in a circle of stones, of priestesses of the Celtic underworld, of sisters of Avalon.
Avalon is really a Celtic term for paradise. It is the other world.
Author Paul Broadhurst writes of the liminal world between imagination and landscape. He says the story of Arthur has roots in the prehistory of the British Isles, when its legends were marked in the sky.
The Arthur myth itself is deeply bound up with the cycles of the sun and the stars, because for hundreds of thousands of years people have lived outside, gathering around campfires under the stars. This was the origin of all mythology.
Broadhurst says early people saw Arthur as Ursa Major, circling the North Star.
Now, the name Arthur in the old Celtic language means great bear. This is the name also of the most famous of constellations. It's often known as the Dipper or the Plough, but its most ancient name, which I believe goes back hundreds of thousands of years to the times of bear worship, was the Great Bear.
And when Broadhurst tells people of Arthur as the bear, and points out the bear not only in the sky, but in the hill above Boscastle Harbour, it changes the way they see it.
You know, people forget the sky's alive, the land is alive.
Nowhere is the landscape of legend more alive than in Tintagel, thanks to medieval cleric Geoffrey of Monmouth.
With the earliest Merlin Welsh is this wild man of the woods, and this notion that we have of him as this magician figure comes largely from Geoffrey.
University of Cardiff professor Sioned Davies recounts how Geoffrey's 12th century History of the Kings of England says Merlin cast a spell that enabled Arthur's father to pretend to be another man and another wife's husband.
So he saunters into the castle and says to his wife, you know, I'm home, darling. And then they have a night of passionate love, and then he leaves. And from that night of passion, then Arthur is born.
Yet these ruins, where thousands of visitors come to find King Arthur and Merlin, had not even been imagined when Geoffrey wrote of him. Tintagel Castle is not really a castle at all. Instead, there are signs that it's a castle. Things like old ruins and a statue of the supposed King Arthur. Yet what people see of Arthur here is almost entirely a literary construction, more like Disney World than Gettysburg. It was imagined by Geoffrey 1,000 years ago and illuminated later by poets and novelists and filmmakers. Now the fallen stone has been transformed into commercial saga. Beneath Arthur's castle, even the sand has been transmuted. At low tide, visitors can clamber down to Merlin's cave, a cavern where the stone has been worn away, leaving an emptiness to be filled from imagination. About a year ago, I dreamed I was in a seaside cave, a lot like this one. Our brain's constantly trying to make sense of our experience. Dreams, art, literature, these things help us to recognize patterns, to see symbols, and to make connections. Broadhurst says those connections have shaped this natural landscape into the supernatural.
You can feel the magic, the old magic in the land here. It's one of those rare places. And of course all these cliffs are haunted by the spirits of Merlin and King Arthur and have been for a very long time.
However, the place most haunted by Merlin and Arthur may be the primordial circle of Stonehenge. Geoffrey said Merlin built this place. Every solstice, thousands trek here. The simply curious, families, green men,
Have you got light?
and all the druidic descendants of Merlin.
I don't call myself Merlin, everybody else calls me Merlin.
Modern druids and writers carve new meanings for these stones with every contact. Stonehenge as a burial site, as an alien landing zone, as a cosmic calendar to support farming.
That's like in North America, they don't have stone circles, they stayed hunter-gatherers. South America, they got stone circles, they got agriculture.
When officials shut down large gatherings at Stonehenge after the COVID pandemic hit, a new story began forming in the drum circles. A story echoed in protests in London and around the world. A story you could hear shouted on the solstice as police forced people back behind the Stonehenge fence lines. Freedom to not be vaccinated. Freedom to not wear masks. Freedom to not be restrained from the stones on sacred days.
Okay, we're here to celebrate the summer solstice. English heritage may not let us in there, but they can't stop us from being here, and they can't cancel Christmas.
Then the more nimble jumped the fences and ran to the stones. The less nimble followed. Police never lifted a hand.
These are our stones!
Yeah!
People drank water from the sacred puddles.
Refreshing.
People kissed the lichen.
The stones!
The stones! The stones!
Then they returned to say prayers with the Druids.
May there be peace in the north. May there be peace in the north. May there be peace throughout the whole world.
May there be peace throughout the whole world.
How do you be?
Carmarthen, in South Wales, is said to be the birthplace of Merlin.
Now, some people say the very name Carmarthen means the castle of Merlin.
Storyteller Nick Brunger says Merlin exists with a foot both in history and legend.
So although Merlin is considered to be a character from fiction, along with Uther Pendragon and Arthur and so on, we know that actually a lot of these individuals did exist.
But the remaining ties between Merlin and the city are a shard of an oak tree, Merlin's oak, that died in 1856, still displayed at Town Hall, and a wooden statue on a downtown mall, across from Burger King. In Carmarthen, no one but me visits the mall to see Merlin. Yet they pass him daily on the way to get a Whopper, or a new purse from TK Maxx. Yet the city of Merlin's youth plays an important part in his legend, because he was noticed for something he didn't have: a father.
Many people wondered where the dad was. A boy like that must have a father, many local men said, volunteering to take that position for themselves, but she would have none of it. Oh no, she said, the boy has a father. He was given to him by magic.
And on a nearby mountaintop in Wales, called Dinas Emrys, the magic of Merlin's birth was important. So important that even today, visitors are drawn there. Up this trail, past the dragon bench, past a glistening waterfall, to a hill where the foundational myth of Wales waits with crumbling stones and human hints. There are subtle indicators here of Welsh history and myth, like this carved eye in a tree of a dragon. As the story goes, the king wanted to build a fortress here. It wasn't going well. What was built each day would come down each night. So the king's wizards were called.
And they said, a sacrifice is called for. We need to sacrifice a boy without a father.
So they brought the child Merlin here. But the boy could see much more than any of the king's wizards. He told the king this site was unstable because 2 dragons were fighting in a hidden lake beneath the ground. And the boy freed the dragons.
And then, with a sound that was like thunder, they rose into the air and started fighting, breathing fire on each other, soared up into the air, coming out above the hilltop. And now the fight was terrifying. Lightning from their flames that came from their mouths heated the air all around. They scorched and charred each other's flanks as they fought one against the other. First the white one was winning, and then the red, and then the red was on top, and then all of a sudden the red was in the ascendancy, and the white one flew away, chased by the red dragon out over the hilltops until they could see no sign of them other than flashes of lightning from the fire and the thunder in their mouths and the skies. Now you can build your castle, great king, said Merlin. Now the red dragon has defeated the white. And this is a sign of what will always happen here in this kingdom. For the red dragon represents the people of our country, and the white dragon the enemies who would serve to oppress us. And from now on, throughout all of the future, the red dragon will be a symbol of our proud people.
And that is why the Welsh flag carries a red dragon today. On Bardsey Island, off Wales' west coast, myth flows with the sea.
Any significant historical event has Bardsey playing a role in it, because everything came past you, always.
Bardsey Island sat on a major shipping lane and hid, some would say, Avalon.
The story goes that King Arthur was roved over to the island of Avalon after being injured in the Battle of Camelon.
One legend associated with Bardsey Island says Merlin lies sleeping in a cave, one that's right over there. The legend also says that this is where Merlin hid the 13 ancient treasures of Britain: a flaming sword, a hamper of never-ending food, and Arthur's cloak of invisibility. Yet after climbing the hill, what I find is a cave quite unsuited to an eternity of rest.
No Merlin, but a lot of spiders.
Yet believe them or not, the stories attached to this land and resonate in the space between rationality and emotion, even for the most pragmatic of us.
There is a heck of a lot more to life than just what we see, isn't there? There's a lot of energy coming from somewhere. As you get older, you can start to see the patterns in that energy, can't you? Well, I can anyway. I hope you are the same.
For me, the energy is never greater than in Glastonbury. The legend of Avalon is written large around the rocky mount of Glastonbury Tor. And all the liminal spaces surrounding the Arthurian legend seem to converge here. Joseph of Arimathea, a friend of Jesus Christ, is said to have come here in the 1st century bearing the Holy Grail. He hid the Grail near the Tor, and a spring bubbled up.
The chalice well is like an enchanted garden with fairies and spirits.
Nick Draper owns a shoe factory at the base of Glastonbury Tor.
Around this area it's riddled with ley lines, very powerful lines in the ground, and when they cross, it's enormously powerful. And you'll notice in the town there isn't a single normal shop there. They just sell crystals. Well, I mean, In town, there's 5 witches' shops. How they keep going, I don't know.
The day I arrive, an anti-vax protest fills downtown. Just a few yards from the abbey, where 12th century monks reportedly found the bodies of Arthur and Guinevere.
Whether or not that's true or not, I think it's made up by a load of monks to get a load of pilgrims coming in.
The Tor, wrote 20th century novelist Marion Zimmer Bradley, was an island in the time of Arthur, surrounded by misty marshes. It is grassy now. Climbing to the top, I walk through a field of sheep. St. Michael's Tower stands at the top, 300 concrete steps above. Bradley saw the Tor as 2 spaces in one. On one side of the veil, magic of Morgan Le Fay and Avalon. On the other, the Christianity of Arthur and Lancelot. Yet each side remained hidden from the other by mist of belief and disbelief. On my visit, I hear the drums in the tower and I see it as Bradley did. The sun falls, and mist rises. People sing, chant, dance. Bright red Mars pierces the mist. A fingernail moon hangs between it and a glowing Venus. Someone shouts freedom. The Tor becomes a nexus in liminal space.
You mentioned you went up the Tor last night. There are people who go up the Tor and they tell you about portholes into another dimension.
I do see my night on the Tor as a portal of sorts. It was a portal between spiritual and physical, past and present, sky and landscape, myth and reality, all moderated by the stories about Arthurian legend that I've studied during my lifetime. When literature meets the landscape, it conveys amazing powers, the power to see through time and rock and water, and to shape the land itself with imagination. The land of Arthur would not exist without it, for the world is built not of stone, but of stories.